Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the first installment of the Columbia University's Master of Science in Sustainability Management Workshop Series, Workshops in Sustainability Careers and Curriculum. In this workshop series, you will hear from our alumni talk about the classes that have helped them launch successful careers in sustainability. Tonight's panel, Governmental Sustainability, Decarbonization, and Environmental Protection, will be moderated by Dr. Steve Cohen. Dr. Cohen is a Senior Vice Dean of Columbia University School of Professional Studies. He is also the director of the Master of Science in Sustainability Management program. At Columbia School of International Public Affairs, Dr. Cohen is a professor of practice of public affairs. He also serves as the director of the Master in Public Administration in Environmental Science and Policy program. This evening, Dr. Cohen is joined by two alumni from the MS in Sustainability Management program, Inés Suaya and Kasey Motley, and an alumni from the MPA in Environmental Science Policy program, Steve Caputo. Please join me in welcoming tonight's speakers.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you for being here. I want to start by just laying out what we're going to be doing here, which a bunch of officials from our Student Association in Sustainability Management came to me and said, there's so many courses and there's so many careers in this field. We need to make some sense of it. And I thought, what a great idea. And so I asked Cindy to organize this, and we will have 9 of these sessions this semester. It's organized as a 0-credit course. So if you're in here as part of the course, you'll get no grade, but you will get a line on your transcript. Next week, the next session is next week, which will be Corporate Sustainability, moderated by our adjunct professor, Vance Marola, who is in charge of sustainability at Colgate-Palmolive. The next session will be September 30th. We're skipping Climate Week because there are so many things going on that week. We couldn't possibly do it that week. But that will be Sustainability Finance, moderated by our faculty member, Bruce Kahn. The next session is October 7th, Environmental Justice, moderated by John Williams, who is on our, who helps run student affairs with Cindy and also teaches environmental justice for us. Then October 14th, The Built Environment, moderated by Professor Lynette Witter. October 21st, International Careers, moderated by Professor Dongua. November 11th, we'll get into Energy Project Finance, moderated by Professor Travis Bradford. Then November 18th, Sustainability Analytics, where we have one of the inventors of life cycle assessment, Professor Christoph Meinrecken. And then we'll wrap up on December 2nd with Nonprofit and Advocacy, moderated by Wendy Hapgood. So that's the full array. We'll be doing this with alums just like this. Let me tell you something about these alums. Kasey over here is a licensed architect and certified energy manager with over a decade of experience advancing sustainable buildings and infrastructure. She is a senior design specialist at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, where she leads decarbonization and electrification programs across aviation, port, transit facilities, and billions of dollars of work. I'm not going to go through any more of her bio, but she's a very impressive graduate of the Sustainability Management program. Seated next to her is Inés Suaya Pons, who is a senior specialist climate impact at TechnoServe. She has over a decade of experience spanning corporate accounting and environmental management. She's a senior specialist on climate impact at TechnoServe, a leading NGO that leverages the power of business and markets to create sustainable pathways out of poverty. She has the Masters of Sustainability Management from right here. She worked at the World Bank, World Wildlife Fund, at BASF, and has extensive experience. And next to her is the alum I know the longest. He's a graduate of the Environmental Science and Policy program. His name is Steve Caputo. He's the Assistant Commissioner of the New York City Department, the Division of Energy Management, and DCAS, which is basically the city's Office of General Service. They're in charge of all the city's facilities and vehicles. He leads a $4 billion program to decarbonize the city government's operations. He is a graduate not just of this SEPA program, he's also in architecture. And a little story I will say is he's the first person I ever saw who did a workshop report, a capstone report, using design principles, explaining to me that design was now going to become central to communication long before anybody else did. So all those capstone reports you see with all the nice graphics, Steve was the first to do that and has been first ever since. So I'm going to ask each of our graduates, starting from this side, working our way down, first to tell us when they graduated from Columbia, their current role, how they got there, and then which courses did they take that were useful. Then we've sent them the list of the current sustainability management courses, which serve as electives for the environmental science and policy students and as field requirements for the SUMA students, and asked them, which courses do they think would be most useful. So we're going to go through this down the line here. Then I might ask some questions and do what I always do is interrupt people. And then we'll ask for questions from the audience, and we'll have somebody bringing you a microphone, because I believe there's some people watching this online. Do we have an audience online? Okay. So why don't we start right here?
Thank you so much. So hi, my name is Kasey again. I graduated in the spring of 2021. I got that wrong originally, but spring of 2021. I was a licensed architect practicing architecture at the Port Authority. Port Authority, for fun fact, pays for your master's program if you get straight A's. So I decided to, in working in architecture, I realized that I was having an impact on the built environment, but not in necessarily a positive way. So I wanted to really understand sustainability more holistically, being able to speak the financial terms, being able to speak holistically on sustainability. So I got my master's part-time through this program. And after that, I got an Environmental Defense Fund fellowship at the city, the mayor's office of, I think it's Climate and Environmental Justice, which was great. I learned more about the energy systems. And then I moved into my current role, which is doing sustainability project business. So familiar with LEED or Envision certifications, I apply those to a lot of different building projects. Port Authority is not just the bus terminal, it's also owns and operates the major airports in New York, the tunnels, bridges, and terminals, the ports, World Trade Center site, a lot of different assets. So we are applying sustainability standards on all of those. Right now, I'd say my biggest program, which is about 50% of my time, is looking at the energy distribution at JFK Airport. Understanding as we start to electrify all of our buildings and electrify our vehicles, all of our current capacity is going to be under strain. So we're looking at a temporal timeline, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, really understanding where this distribution is going to need to be seeing major investment needs. So that's what I've been working on thus far. As far as most useful courses, I love my capstone. My capstone was working on a sustainability plan for Mount Vernon. I like to think that all of Mount Vernon's really aggressive climate action recently is because of our climate action plan. I don't
Absolutely.
know if it's
Absolutely.
all the geothermal and the work that they're doing. But I also encourage everyone in the program to cross-register through courses outside of SUMA as well. SUMA obviously offers a world of courses. We'll talk more about that, but I made sure to take classes in SEPA and GSAP, and it was great to just broaden the network there. So
When you looked at the list of courses that we're offering now, are there any that seem to you to be things that either you wish you took, or you might say that in your current job would be useful for these students?
I want to sit in on some of them. I wrote down a bunch of the ones that I was excited about. Analysis for energy efficiency, electrification and decarb regulations, and intelligent energy systems. Those are the ones that I want to sit on a class and get their syllabus, their reading list.
Well, we'll return to that. Inés?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. First of all, thank you, Steve, so much for the invitation, Cindy and the SUMA team. I'm super honored to be back and a little bit emotional because I hadn't been back since my graduation. So it's great to be back and speak to you, because one day we were all the three of us sitting there. So it's a real honor. My name is Inés. I am a senior specialist on climate impact at TechnoServe. TechnoServe is an NGO. I think the question was when I graduated, which was December 2022. I was an international student, so I did the master's in 1.5 years, so pretty quick. And the path that brought me to my current job is definitely not a straightforward one. I'm a certified public accountant, and I worked in that field for more than 5 years, always in financial accounting, business in general, and always in the private sector. So for a long time working there, I realized I'm not that fulfilled. I need something else. And something personal, I grew up partly in the countryside, so I'm very connected to agriculture, to farmers. So I started thinking about what that thing that would fulfill me was, and I realized that I wanted to work in something related to climate and food systems. But in order to make that career switch from, because being a CPA is very different, I realized that I needed to pursue a master's degree, and that is what brought me from Uruguay, from where I'm originally from, to New York City, to Colombia, to do this master's. So during the time that I was a graduate student, and even afterwards, I was a TA for the GAG course with John Dickinson. And I think that was pivotal to land my job that I have right now and the one that I had previous to that, to this one. After I graduated SUMA, I joined the World Bank's private arm, the International Finance Corporation, as a consultant on financed emissions, which is something that financial institutions care a lot about, and only them, because it only applies to financial institutions. And after that, I jumped to the role that I have nowadays. But I am 99% sure that the fact that I took the GAG course during my time as a student, the fact that I was then a TA for 2 years, was the reason why I got those 2 jobs. So that's definitely a course that I think it's really important. And in hand with that one goes the LCA course as well. If you are looking to build a career in the greenhouse gas accounting field, I'd say that those 2 are really important. If you're not, if you want to do something else, I still recommend that you consider one or the other, because it's very important that as a sustainability professional, you know how to speak the GAG words. So, so yeah, I would say those 2 courses were pivotal for me. I can stop here and then.
Let me make a couple of points before we go to Steve. First, greenhouse gas measurement and life cycle assessment are 2 of the most important methodologies in our field. And a lot of the work in developing those courses was done right here. John Dickinson's course is, I think, one of the first that ever was taught at an American university. And we now offer many sections of that of people who've taken the course with John, and then he trained to teach. The same thing is true of life cycle assessment, which Christoph Meinrichen started, and now we have multiple sections of that. So those 2 courses are, particularly if you're pursuing an analytic path organizationally, they're very, very important. And they are among the more in-demand courses we offer.
Yeah.
Okay, Steve.
Hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here. Thank you, Steve, for that kind introduction. Can you hear me okay? Okay, cool. So I graduated in 2009, which seems like ages ago at this point. When I started, the reason I was drawn to this is well before SUMA started. I think I would have really been interested in SUMA. I think the opportunity to be able to work and do this program at the same time is terrific. But at the time I practiced architecture for a little while, so we have that in common, Kasey. And urban sustainability was just starting to happen, and it wasn't really clear what that meant at the time. So I had a little bit of experience working with some city agencies that were incubating sustainability initiatives, but I felt like in order to advance in this and help build a field, I needed to get some discipline. So I came to Columbia to get that discipline. So I graduated in 2009. I did some studies at the architecture and planning school as well. And then at that time, it was right after Mayor Bloomberg started the city's first long-term planning and sustainability plan, which is Plan YC, which I'm sure if you haven't heard about, you'll hear about in maybe a case study in your time here. I got laser focused on wanting to work there because it felt like the most exciting place to do business in sustainability was like the city of New York, because at the time we were creating a whole governance framework which lasts today. And despite everything that we hear about governance frameworks being ripped up in the federal government, like New York City is really strong because fundamentally its sustainability program is built in law. So I left here and I was able to get a job as a policy advisor in the Office of Long-Term Planning and Sustainability. I was there for 4 years, ended up being deputy director. During that time, I ran the city's clean heat program, which phased out use of heavy heating oil in buildings. By the time we were done with the program, about 10,000 buildings had switched off of heavy fuel oil, which led to about a 70% reduction in wintertime sulfur pollution. That I don't think, and I was involved in like basically pitching that program. I briefed Mike Bloomberg over breakfast at Gracie Mansion. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without this program, because I think you gain the skill set to analyze a program, brand it, communicate about it, and so I owe that part of my career really to Steve and this program. And then so I was also there after Hurricane Sandy. During and after Hurricane Sandy, I was helped with disaster recovery operations, and then the city's resilience plan, which then became the kind of second piece of New York City's policy framework. And did some other things between here and there. In the last 8 years, I've been working as assistant commissioner for operations at the city agency that is the backbone to New York City government, known as DCAS, or Citywide Administrative Services. That agency does a lot of different things for government, runs the fleet, helps with real estate, does the civil service system, and runs energy management. And what that means is, it means two things. One is we facilitate the acquisition of energy for over 5,000 buildings and pieces of infrastructure, and now increasingly the automotive fleet. I'm not involved in that part of the work. I'm involved in the decarbonization side. So we're every day getting up and trying to decarbonize 5,000 buildings. We have a very aggressive policy in the city for both public and private, but on the public side, our target is 50% reduction by 2030, and we're at about just over 30% right now. So we have a long way to go. We have a lot to be proud of, but we have a long way to go. And I can fill you in on all the hardships that we face, and some of the good things too. So in terms of the courses that I'm envious about, the accounting, finance, and modeling course is something I wish that we had available, or at least based on what I've read on paper, that we had available back when I was here. Accounting, I had to learn accounting on the job. You always said that what gets budgeted matters, and I understood that abstractly, but then really having to do accounting in government I had to learn that on the job, as well as modeling, like financial modeling, Excel modeling, whether it's for financial transactions or policy modeling, was something I was fortunate to learn on the job. But I think learning it from professionals who do it every day is an exciting and invaluable opportunity. So that was the course that caught my attention. The courses I loved when I was here, the economics of sustainability, just kind of putting what we do in an economic framework was critical. I love the public management and capstone courses, because that was all about like, how do you take an idea and make it real and have it have impact. And then urban politics was a SEPA course that I took that really gave me a framework for government and how unique the kind of cities are in the framework of government. So thank you.
So I'm going to ask you a question, Stephen, and see if our other panelists can address this. So your office has grown since you started, right? So why don't we talk about how it's grown and what you look for in people that you've been hiring?
Good question. So when I started, we had a $10 million annual operating budget, and so now it's about 90 million. So that about tenfold growth there, and I was about 5 people when I started within the group that I oversee, and now it's about 65. So we've seen a 10x growth, which is like what you want to see in this industry is that level of investment. And I've been very fortunate to help sort of shape that and be someone that then helps implement at that scale. In terms of what we look for people who are tenacious about their work, and it doesn't always mean that you have a whole list of NGOs and corporations that you've worked for, but it shows, especially when you're coming out of school, like you were really invested in doing coursework and whether it was volunteering or whatnot to acquire a skill set. And even for someone that has just a couple years experience or just no experience, but you can see that they were showing up to things like this and developing their skill sets that helps people stand out even for entry level positions. And then hard skills, like you're learning hard skills, sort of financial modeling skills, engineering skills, policy analysis. Those are things that we look for as well. But I think that the tenacity and the, showing commitment on your resume is really critical.
Well, let me ask the same questions for Inés and for Kasey. As you either hired people or seen people hired, what are organizations looking for? And what do you think, what advice would you give our students to make them present better as they hit the market?
I absolutely agree. Looking for people with leadership backgrounds, whether it be through different programs or having TA for a course, again, showing that you're not just sitting in on every class, but you're actually, stepping up if you are leading the capstone versus just being a member of it. Also, while SUMA provides a wide breadth of coursework, we were just talking about how many different types of courses. If I'm looking at your coursework and it's totally spread out everywhere, it might show a lack of commitment. So while in the first year or first couple of semesters, absolutely take the classes that you didn't think you would like. I think towards the end of your studies, definitely zoom in, definitely come out with, I want to be an expert in X, because you are coming out with a master's. So you should be able to say, I'm an expert in the subject. So
I think that's a good point. And to be tangible, what I'd say is, you have a distribution requirement in sustainability management. You have electives in environmental science and policy. So you got about 4 or 5 courses, or 3 or 4 courses that should be focused on some area. Okay, whether it's finance or it's greenhouse gas and life cycle assessment, be able to, because you're going to have to spread out anyway between your core and MPA or your field requirements in the 5 fields, but to have some connection between them. And the thing I guess I'd also echo is this mission orientation, the show that you're committed and care. We are in a mission-driven profession, and we're still young, and so everybody who's educated, like these folks, they look for people who will think and feel a little bit like they do.
In my case, because I work in greenhouse gas measurement, is quite specific. Data analytics is very important. I would say, so everything that they said, absolutely. And then I would add Excel. Knowing Excel is very important. But not just like, oh yeah, I know how to do, this plus this, like good skills on Excel. I would say that's really important. I even in the hiring processes that I participated, I created a test in Excel for the candidates to do, so that we can test how good they are, because sometimes they say they are good and maybe, they are not as good as we expect. So Excel is definitely one. Then if you're interested in a career in international development, I would say languages are also very important. So, of course that English is important, but if you have a second language, that will definitely position you better than someone that only speaks one language. So that is very important. And then again, as I said, because I work in greenhouse gas measurement, of course, as I said before, like LCA or GAG is really important. Even when I, participate of hiring processes for people that will work in monitoring, reporting, and verification, which not only includes greenhouse gas emissions, they might be focusing on other metrics. I want them to know something about greenhouse gas emissions, like what is it? How does climate change work? That basic knowledge is very important for any type of professional working in the sustainability space. I think that's fundamental. And then I think that would be it. And like a personal suggestion would be to think a part of your hard skills and your technical knowledge, what you can bring to that company, what you can bring to that team from a personal perspective. Because at the end of the day, I think that is what will make you stand out. The hard skills you can learn, you can study them, but the soft skills are really, really important. And at the end of the day, I think they are what sets you apart from other candidates. So.
Okay. I think what I want to do is turn to questions from those of you who are in the room. I don't know, how many people are on Zoom for us, do we know? Okay, but for those, I'm sorry we can't have you ask questions, but for the people who are sitting here, we're going to, we have somebody to pass a microphone? Because you do need to speak into the mic so that people on Zoom can hear you. So if you have questions, okay, let's start here and then go to you, then you can pass the mic from one to the next, okay? And you can either direct it to the whole panel or to one person, whatever you like.
Be fast. For Ms. Pons, you had mentioned with knowing a language, like I have a somewhat working proficiency of Spanish, but that means I can.
Talk directly into the mic.
Sorry. I have a somewhat working proficiency of Spanish, but in a way that like I can go to Spain and get around. I can't necessarily talk about greenhouse gas emissions and accounting on a, at the drop of a hat. So is that even something worth mentioning when looking at jobs, or like how do you advise working around that?
Yeah. No, and for sure, like even in my case, because I learned greenhouse gas emissions like in English, it's very hard for me to translate. So yeah, definitely that's a challenge. But two things. One, when you start working on a field, on a specific field like GAG, you start like learning, as you go, the terms and then the translation. And so it's something that you learn as you go. And, at first you might be scared, but then you're going to see that you'll be fine. And then the other thing is that, for example, if I were interviewing you, no, if you have a good level of Spanish, like you understand and you're able to communicate with a farmer, for example, then that's enough. I don't need you to go and explain, climate change or greenhouse gas accounting to a farmer, right? So it's all right. You don't need to know the technical terminology. And then when you're working on your desk and you encounter some words in a different language that are technical, nowadays we have AI, we have ChatGPT, Gemini, we have Google Translate. You can use that and the translation will be quite accurate. So, even if you get a report in a different language, you can have the report translated by those by AI, and that's super helpful. You might not get it super right, but you'll get the idea. So there are workarounds, nothing to be scared of.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Kiran. I'm also in the ESP cohort. First of all, thank you all for being here and speaking with us. My question is to Stephen again, specifically. Something that we have to deal with right now specifically is like I know I speak with a lot of working professionals who say that, we just had to lay off a bunch of our people and we're on a hiring freeze. We're not looking for anyone right now. So like hearing this day in and day out is a little bit discouraging. And I noticed that there's a lot of similarity between your cohort and our cohort specifically because you had to deal with the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. And that must have been really discouraging as well. So can you speak about how you dealt with it?
Yeah, I can offer plenty of discouragement about the hiring environment. I mean, I'm on the other side of it. I have a 40% vacancy rate on our team. And we actually just hired this is going to be so depressing, but just hired someone that I interviewed in January and they finally got an approval. So it is a hard time, particularly in government in New York City. There's a de facto hiring freeze. They don't call it that, but it is de facto. So it's a hard hiring environment. You've got the federal government having dissolved itself in terms of sustainability. But I don't think you should be discouraged. I mean, I think I came in to see Steve a few weeks ago, very discouraged about the state of the world. And he said, like, this industry is not going anywhere. Like it's, just pick up the news and, from top to bottom in any magazine or newspaper, you're going to read about climate. And that definitely wasn't the case when I was here in school. And it was like, wow, there's an article about climate in the newspaper. Now it's just every day. So I think you will face, we're all facing challenges now, whether you're an employer trying to find people and get them through a hiring process, or if you're searching for a job. But I think those challenges are finite and you're in the right industry and there's so much opportunity.
Let me add to it that it's never easy when it's good, and it's never as difficult when it's tough. A lot of people do chit chat. I'm on the board of a company whose stock has tripled this year, and we've been hiring people left and right in this field. And you need to not connect to the social media and media images to really understand the reality of the world. The fact is, look at the data. If you read my blog piece from today, you will see that decarbonization is continuing, and it's pretty impervious to what's going on in Washington. Now, local government in this past several years has had some tough times, but still, they're hiring people. You have to be in the right place at the right time, and you have to be persistent, and you also have to use the connections, because not everybody's hiring at all times, but when you're hiring somebody, you might need somebody really quickly, and you need to know the people that know those people, and that's how this stuff works. But I'm struck sometimes by how much misinformation, disinformation, and when times are good, it's like it's easy to find a job. It's never easy, and so I think the key is persistence and really pushing all the time. We have other questions?
If I
ahead.
can just jump
Yeah.
in really quickly, speaking to the network, I think I don't want it to go underplayed the importance of the teachers here at SUMA. There are some incredible teachers who are mostly working professionals. So even if there's a course that you're not necessarily super interested in, but it's taught by a professor who's established in the field. I specifically took my capstone because Tom Abdallah was doing it. I took a course with Rohit Arkwala because I knew I wanted to work in the government, and Adam Freed, we just spoke about, is still teaching metrics.
Yeah.
There's incredible teachers. So
No,
send
and
them to class, talk to them.
Rid Argawala, who teaches in the ESP program, an elective, is the chief climate officer of the city of New York and in charge of the DEP. And yeah, I would echo that. The adjuncts and the regular faculty have lots and lots of connections. Don't be shy about talking to them.
Sorry, may I? Sorry, 1 minute. I say this because this resonates also. I think it's important to see that there are other markets as well. So to see what's going on, the world is really big, and there may be places where sustainability is just kicking off and they need professionals in that field. So I would say keep the door open also to other markets. They might surprise you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I call it casting a wide net. I remember, people say, well, I want to work in the international office of EPA, back when the international office had no power at all. And then 10 years later, it became the center of EPA. So you really have to, look more than in a very narrow part of the market. Let's get more questions. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have another quick question, and this is for the group. How did you continue to develop your relationship with Columbia University after you graduated?
I stayed in touch with Steve and some other professors, and was very fortunate to be asked to co-teach a class with Adam Freed, was the metrics course, and then I taught here for 2 years. But I think that I would emphasize the network again. But I think also, and it's this forum and the kind of semester-long course, even though it's no credit, is a great thing to do. But and I've heard it was student-driven. I think you have a lot of power as students to try to call on this sector to come together. And so one of the things we did when I was in school, we organized like an urban sustainability colloquium and invited people who had different roles, including actually the person whose job I ended up getting. But we kind of figured out, well, if we asked them, they might show up. They didn't necessarily have Columbia affiliations. In fact, most didn't, but they did show up. And I think if you're interested in the World Bank and you want to put together a well-focused sort of series or even just a panel and invite someone from the World Bank to come, they might actually show up, and that might be an opening for you to connect. So I think you really have a lot of agency as students.
Yeah, practitioners are very responsive to students. The sustainability management students every April have a symposium that's an all-day long conference where they invite many people who have no connection to us, and almost all of them show up because it's just such a compliment to have students like you invite us to come to campus. Did others of you have?
Yeah, echoing that, it's really about the networks you build. Women in Sustainability, I know we were piloting a mentorship program, looking at getting mentors, and I still remain in contact with a lot of those people, but also the students you're with the course with. I think it's easy to look at the professors and the people who have graduated, the alumni, as these like models of what you can be, but the people who you're sitting next to are the people who are in 5 years going to be the leaders of this field. So make sure you're talking before class with the people, you're meeting after for coffee and study breaks, because a lot of those people I still am seeing just thrive in the network, and it's amazing to see where your fellow students are going.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say in my case, this year I became a mentor to a SUMA student. And then after I graduated for an entire year, I was at the TA for the GAG course. So that it was also a way to stay connected. And I agree with what you're saying, like the friends that you make, you know, they, for example, in my case, we exchange job openings, for example. And if your friend works there, they can put a word for you. So I think definitely like the friends you make will help you along the way in your career. So yeah.
Okay.
Hello, thank you for being here tonight. I'm Lizandra Vega. And prior to coming to the program, to the SUMA program, I was an executive search and talent acquisition. And I just wanted to share something on the heels of spreading your search. And one of the things, having been on the other side in talent acquisition, is that whether you speak another language or not, it's not a bad idea to open your LinkedIn to worldwide opportunities, because you never know where the talent acquisition person is sitting or what that person has recruiting. And for instance, I happen to be in the US, but I was recruiting for all of the Scandinavian countries of a particular company. So you just never know. And so that's just something that I just wanted to
Okay,
add.
thank you.
In terms of opening that up.
Okay, other questions for the panel? I see in the back. Yeah, we'll have to move the mic around. Thank you, Cindy.
Hello. I'm a SUMA student who was not a mid-career professional when I entered the program, and I know a lot of students are. I agree that the program does offer different kind of unofficial tracks, such as energy and finance. What ways other than coursework do you recommend to fill resume gaps when applying for jobs to show proficiency in skills such as business management when you lack relevant experience?
Anybody want to take a crack at that?
We spoke a little bit about just taking leadership roles in different organizations. If there's not a leadership role, keep pushing for it, right? I think the boards of these groups can be as large as you guys.
That's a good point. We have more student groups in the Sustainability Management Program, and some of those groups are university-wide open. We have a group on biodiversity and the built environment, women in the environment, SUMASA, and they all need members and boards, and there's Net Impact and just a whole bunch of them.
And also SUMA has a great relationship with the Environmental Defense Fund. I'd mentioned I'd done a fellowship with them. A lot of SUMA alumni have gone through that program, and they'll match you up with, depending on your interests, different groups. And it's a summer-wide fellowship program, but it definitely will fill a summer gap and will bring out those experiences and open up your network.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have been hearing a lot of the people have like around 4 to 5 years at least of industry experience. What is your suggestion for new undergrads who are just coming into a master's program directly out of the undergrad?
I think everybody had to be in that position at some point, right? Like, and I think part of what we've been talking about today is like how to differentiate yourself, even if you have very little full-time work experience. And I think that this program gives you a lot of different opportunities to do that. And include, and so I think it's important to be like modest and transparent about your resume too. So like, don't make it look like you worked for Environmental Defense Fund if you just did a 3-month capstone with them. On the other hand, you can say, I did a 3-month capstone, but these are all the skills that I gained. This is the role I played. But I think taking advantage of the opportunities to pick up not only through coursework, but your extracurricular activities, pockets of skills. I think there's some great, especially nowadays, there's amazing online content too. And I wouldn't, if you had on your resume that you did, you learned Python and you did it on an online coursework through LinkedIn or something like that, that's cool. Like that actually shows me that you can do some Python and that might be helpful for an analytics team. So, I think you can be really entrepreneurial about your background and the skills that you acquire. And there's so many opportunities out there, including online education, to like supplement what you've done here.
Great. Yeah.
Answering your question and also hers, two things. As you're saying courses, to put it as an example, when I graduated SUMA, I spent a few months unemployed looking for a job. And I thought, well, I have all this time. How am I going to use it? So I found that, for example, the IDB, which is the Inter-American Development Bank, it's the multilateral bank. They offer courses for like $50 if you want the certificate. If you don't want it, is even cheaper. And I did a biodiversity assessment certificate because I hadn't had the chance to take biodiversity classes at SUMA. So I gained that skill through that certificate. So definitely doing courses is a great way to kill the time while you gain skills. And I would also say that if you want to build your CV, but as he was saying before, the job market is a bit tough at the moment. Sometimes the path to get to where you want to get is going to take longer than you thought it would take, and that is okay. So maybe you won't get out of SUMA and get that dream job that you thought you would get when you first started the program. Maybe there is a consultancy that you will have to do, or a fellowship, or an internship. So look for, as I said before, keep your head open to new markets, as she was saying, but also keep your head open to other positions that may not be exactly what you were looking for, but are a good option to build your CV and kill time while you work towards that dream job that you want so bad. So that would be my advice. Look at, consultancies. Multilateral banks have consultancies. There are different organizations that had fellowships, internships. And the good thing is that type of role, the hiring process is much faster than for a full-time position. So you might want to consider that while, you look for your dream job. So.
Okay, other questions?
My steps in for the day. Thank you, everybody.
Hello, thank you for hosting this panel. So AI is a very prominent subject in sustainability right now due to both environmental implications, but also possible positive contributions. Are there any other emergent or upcoming technologies that you think would have an impact on sustainability?
Having worked recently a lot in the energy sector, there are new technologies every single day. Look out for Climate Week. There are a lot of different events, sponsors putting together different showcases for technologies, distributed energy resources, different battery sources. I think that there's no possible way to keep on touch with every single one of them, but definitely lean in and just be adaptable. I think there is a course on AI at SUMA. So I would say, as much as we can question the sustainability of it, lean in learn as much as you can, because even if you want to criticize it, it's better to know what it is and criticize it than speak from not knowing.
Okay, do we have some other questions? I see that. Are you passing a mic around? Thanks. Thanks.
Kind of tangentially related, but as we enter the workforce, are there any ways that you recommend like AI proofing ourselves? Like I know in a conversation I had earlier today, they were talking about like how AI isn't perfect. So knowing like the ins and outs of something, like I know Christoph's LCA is like a really good way to still be like a really competitive professional with that skill. Do you have any other tips or recommendations?
I don't know. I think first and foremost is learn it, get ahead of it. I think as much as, the economy is not the greatest right now, you guys are in a prime condition of being able to adopt a lot of these technologies versus if you were to graduate in 5 years and the whole world is going to be different. And I don't know what that would look like. So graduating in the near future and being able to learn it, I think is first and foremost.
Here's a different question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Gabriela and I'm from SUSI. And the question is for
Sustainability science, for those of you who don't know.
so what is a typical day at work for you?
Can you say that again?
What is a typical day for you at work?
Frustrating.
First we fight, then we stop, then we fight again.
What is a typical day of work? I mean, the cliche of no 2 days look the same is true. I mean, I would say a third of my time is figuring out how to. There's fighting fires, so we're elected officials coming up with new policy ideas, some of which are really smart and we should go with, and some of which are totally zany and like we should want to kill because we can't as an organization take on a target that makes is impossible. So there's that. I do a lot of software application sponsorship, so that's a lot of my day. I work a lot with teams and do a lot of coaching. So I don't know if that's helpful to you to as a response.
Yeah, I can. So same thing, like for me, every day is different, but I would say like if I look at the past year, I have like days where I have meetings with projects. But I didn't explain quite well what I do when I introduce myself. Apologies, I was a bit nervous. But basically what I do is we as an NGO, we design and implement projects in different sectors, mainly agriculture, where we work with smallholder farmers, and also business and for example, working with small entrepreneurs in recycling or textiles or food processing. So what I do is I help those projects that do what we call regenerative initiatives, which doesn't have to be only related to agriculture. For example, circular economy, we consider that regenerative. So I support those projects to measure their greenhouse gas impact, and also other metrics that are related to nature and climate that the donor may or the project sponsor may require. So what I would say that daily I meet with project teams that requires me to switch languages. That's why I was saying that languages are important in the international development field, because we implement projects in Latin America, in Africa, and in Asia. Then I would say processing data, getting data from farmers, for example, trying to identify outliers. So I have to have a sharp eye, using Excel most of the time. And then also building training material, because I'm the only person in the organization that works in the field of greenhouse gas measurement. So I build a lot of material on what is GHG emission, what are GHG emissions, what is climate change, and so yeah, and I meet with a lot of people to explain that to them also live. Oh, sorry.
My day-to-day, again, different every day. I'd say I'm managing a lot of engineers right now, looking at our energy systems. So just being able to speak, maybe not a lot of real languages, but a lot of different colloquialisms between engineering's different teams. And then we're currently trying to push policy. So I'll likely grab Steve's ear after this to talk about how we can start to benchmark Port Authority buildings. Because that's an ongoing conversation with us, is pushing through different policies and being resilient as times change, stakeholders change, but still trying to push sustainability agendas.
So I'm going to ask a question about the sort of skills that you're looking for when you hire people, but that a decade ago or 5 years ago really weren't present yet. And, in a sense, what are the trends? Where do you think, what kinds of things? These are current students, they have a couple of years to do studies. Is there some particular thing? I mean, you mentioned life cycle analysis and greenhouse gas measurement. You've all mentioned a couple of things. Looking forward, not so much in the present, is there something you see emerging that these students should be paying attention to, that perhaps we as faculty should be thinking about in terms of new things that we're not even doing now?
I think data analytics is so key, and I want to echo what you said about Excel. Like, we so often have people come and say, "I know Excel," and they can do the simple formulas, but not more advanced modeling. And data analytics is partly like what your chops are in terms of, I can do R, I can do Python, I can do Excel, I can do this, that, and the other. But it's also before you do any of that stuff, you've got to frame out the problem and have an analytical approach. And so increasingly looking for people who have both of those things. They can, they can, if you hand them something, not only can they ultimately implement a solution or create a model, or using a modeling approach, but they can also break down the problem for you and say, like, help us figure out, what are we actually after? What is the question we're trying to answer? How to best frame that question and how to measure it. And
So what to measure in addition to how to measure it, and how to break the problem into the component parts that you need to actually be thinking about.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I would add to that, like, one final step. Once we have the measurements, what do we do with that? It's important that, you are, for example, you have a metric, you have a percentage, how much it varies over time, but then you need to explain that to the person that makes the decisions, that will most likely look at budget, as you were saying before. So it's important to know how to translate technical data into easily digestible data, and into, cost savings and initiatives. Okay, we have this, how are we going to decrease this metric? We need to do this, and then this costs this, and you have to be able to present that to senior management. So that is very important. In hand with that, I would say goes knowing Power BI, for example. That is knowledge that I don't have, that I would love to have.
Which is the more advanced version of Excel, actually.
Exactly, like creating dashboards where, for example, I don't know, you're working in different countries, so you can have a map with like circles in each country. Like, it's super useful. At the end of the day, people like good graphics. So if you know that, I'd say it's a plus. And finally, if you work in measurement, maybe not knowing softwares, but being able to create a survey or a data collection form that is good and serves its purpose. That is something that I value, because it's something that I had to learn for the job that I have right now. So, yeah.
I think you guys hit the mark on everything. Don't even want to take away from your answers, because that was perfect.
Okay, we'll take a couple more from the students, and then I'm going to ask the panel to give us some concluding remarks. Somebody who hasn't asked a question yet? Okay.
Hello, my name is Tema, and I'm in the SUMA program. My question is directed to Maria Inés. You talked a lot about GHG emissions and how important it was for you to take the class here. AI is playing a major, I want to know AI's role in GHG accounting right now, and if you think that, so like, is it important to take a deep dive into GHG emission accounting, or is a surface level understanding of it enough given AI, just for the future?
Okay. Your last question about, is it like just an overview enough? I would say no, because even if a machine is doing it, you need to know what the machine is doing in any type of task, because the machine may break and you need to know how to fix it. And most importantly, you need to identify the error. So I wouldn't rely only on AI. So I would say an overview is not enough. Take the deep dive. Also, those models are made by people. So there's people behind them. And who is making that? It has to be a specialist, right? So definitely deep dive is necessary. And then I'm not familiar with AI. I have to be honest. So I don't know any new like innovative software that maybe is using AI. I'm not familiar with that. So I don't know how much it's going to change the field. But here's something I can say based on my previous career in financial accounting. If I compare financial accounting to greenhouse gas accounting is actually, like, financial accounting is light years away from GHG accounting. We have the frameworks, the standards. We are told exactly what to do, and of course, it's much easier because it's money. In when it comes to GHG, for example, if you look at a farm, soil captures carbon, so it's a living organism. It's very hard to estimate how much it captures, right? So that's difficult. It's not exactly the same financial and GAG, but still, we've been doing financial accounting for so long that it is really standardized. So I can see AI affecting that more than GAG because I feel like there's so much work to be done yet. For example, the GHG protocol hasn't yet released the guidance for the land sector. It's a draft. It's been a draft for the last 2 years, and they said that they would release it last year. They didn't. So I think there's so much that we have to figure it out, that if we want to bring AI to the table is like, oh, okay, wait, I don't think we're there yet.
So let me make a more general point about analytic tools, which greenhouse gas measurement, financial accounting, these are all tools that evolve over time. AI evolves over time. They get more sophisticated. And what happens to professionals, and this is what I think is most important for you, is the expectations become higher. So a CFO in the 1950s had much less on his or her plate, they're almost all his, than a CFO does in 2025. And so, because they didn't have Excel, they didn't have the computing power, they didn't have Power BI. And so all of these tools mean that the humans that are doing the analysis and are making the management suggestions are going to have a more creative role to play because you have a lot more stuff to deal with, but it doesn't replace that creative life experience that you bring to the table. And so part of that is the interpersonal, and we've heard a little bit about this, the soft skills, the team skills, the interpersonal connections. And the way I often put it, even when I was in graduate school, I learned more in cafes and bars than I learned in classrooms. And I suggest you spend time in classrooms, but don't short circuit that other time where you're engaged with each other and learning. I think part of what everybody here has said is that they become part of a network, and it's a lifelong network where they're engaged with the people they went to school with, their faculty, and with new colleagues that they meet. And these tools don't replace that. They actually make it, the expectations on you become higher. And that's what AI is going to do to all of this and to everything we do. And it's nothing to be scared of, but it definitely changes what you need to know. And if we needed lifelong learning before, boy, we're going to need it in the future. So I'm sorry for speaking at length about that, but this is something that, as an educator, I have to spend a lot of time thinking about what's our value added, and are we, we're constantly changing our curriculum and adding things because the field's changing. We are in the most dynamic, fast-changing field there is because of the infusions of these technologies. I think we'll take one more question from the student body, and then I'm going to ask our speakers to conclude. I guess over here, anybody? Where's the mic? Oh, did somebody already have oh, did you just ask a question? Okay. Let's pass it down to somebody toward the front here. I think right here. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Thank you for sharing your insights. I think it's really helpful. I just have a question like to the panel. Where do you guys see yourself, 10 years from now in the sense of sustainability and the work that you will be doing? Thank you.
You're gonna keep doing this stuff, or you're gonna turn pro and play baseball or something?
Honestly, building off of Steve's point, I started with an architecture background. I've been moving more and more into the energy space because I see the demand, I see the need, and I see the impact that sustainable planning for these energy systems is really important. So I just see that role growing, whether it be on the policy side or on the infrastructure side.
Anything else? Anybody else want to contribute to that? What are you gonna do 10 years from now?
Yeah. That's a question that sometimes they ask you when
In a
hire
job interview?
process. Yeah. And his one that freezes me. I'm like, because and we're seeing that right now, right? Things are changing so fast that I personally don't like to to think, oh, that's where I want to be, because I don't know. In my case, when I was 18, I studied something that is not what I do right now. So I'm open to the universe and let it surprise me. Let's see what it brings. But I definitely want to stay in the sustainability field. I want to become more of a specialist in greenhouse gas accounting in the agriculture field, because it's a bit of an unexplored field and the methodology is not as straightforward as it is for other sectors like energy, for example. So I definitely want to stay there. And I know for sure that I want to use my knowledge to inspire others as well, because that's what's going to make us change, in exponentially in how the way we can scale our work is by inspiring others. So hopefully I can do that.
Okay, so Steve, what do you want to do when you grow up?
Well, I mean, I'm a manager now, and when you manage, you sort of it's funny because today there's and at least in my role, I think in so many management roles, there's so much coming at you, right? So you have to be in the weeds on things, but you also have to step back from what maybe you liked doing. So whether it was architecture or it might be, and I'm sure as you take on new projects, like you might not be doing the thing that you grew up loving to do. And I think maybe one way to think about what you want to do in 10 years is how much applied work do you want to be doing versus management, and how, if you see yourself on a management trajectory, how do you stay passionate about the thing that's like your core discipline, if you have a core discipline? And that is something I'm trying to figure out still. And I'm actually like in a soul searching mode myself and seeing what the universe brings. So I think there's a lot to say for fate and
Okay.
chance of that.
So I'm going to ask our panelists to give the students here one piece of advice as they become, I mean, some of them are already sustainability professionals, but as they leave our programs and hit the job market, what would you say is the most important piece of advice you'd like to give to these students as we leave tonight?
I'll give one high level and one tangible. High level is staying inspired, and I keep a pulse on academia because sometimes in the world of sustainability can get a bit bogged down with the realistic side of things. So staying inspired through academia. And then the more tangible is, we spoke a lot about networks, but on LinkedIn, after you're speaking with a professor or a co-worker or anyone else, message them on LinkedIn, say, hi, it was great speaking to you at the end of our class on sustainability metrics. I really enjoyed it. And it's a simple message like that, but it means next time you reach out to them, that'll be the first message that pops up, so that if they say, I don't remember who this person is, they can see very quickly that they met you during this course. So.
Great.
I would say do not compare yourselves against others. Like, don't look to the sides, look forward. Look your path ahead and not the path of others. Because it's very easy to do that, particularly when you're surrounded by peers all the time, right? To see, oh, that person's doing that, that person's doing that, I'm not doing that, I'm a failure. and it's very easy for your self-esteem to drop, particularly in this job market that is so tough as well, right? When we get more rejections than offers. So I would say do not compare yourself, because it's just not useful. And each one of us has our story. We all come from a different place, from a different background, and we are all here because we're chasing something different. So some people maybe came here because they want to live in New York. Some others because they want to make money. Some others because they want to learn a new skill. Some others because they want to become the CEO. Some others because they want to build their own business. So everybody has a different motive, different to ours. So it's not good to compare yourself, because you never know what that other person is seeking. You never know where they come from. You never know how well or how not well connected they are. We are all here living our own journey. And I don't want to sound like philosophical or anything like that, but I'm talking from experience. It's very easy to look to the sides and say, oh my God, like I'm not where I want it to be. And hey, take it easy. You have your own timing, and you're gonna work hard, and it's gonna happen. Maybe not as fast, and it's gonna take time, but it's gonna happen. Don't look to the sides. Look to your own path ahead. That's my advice.
Okay, Steve, last word.
Yeah, thanks. The thing that I'm really focused on now is change management, and the thing that comes natural to me as a kind of person who likes to shape initiatives is the front end, where it's like, got the idea, we can work to build a collaborative environment, bring the stakeholders together, do a pitch, but then it's like, okay, so you've got a green light now. How do you get some, and maybe you've even built the thing, maybe you've built the software application, or you've built the program. How do you get it to really stick? How do you get it to work beyond, like, you might not be in that role anymore to champion it? How does it become part of this, the system? And those things kind of bored me at first, including like standard operating procedures. Like my eyes would just glaze over, and now I'm like, we need procedures to make sure that something is going to live on. And I think hardwiring your initiatives, focusing on how does not just the kind of shiny part of getting to yes and getting something built, but like, how do you actually sustain it? And I think that's kind of the core of what we do, but building out the systems, the documentation is so key in this industry. Like, if you do something at work and you don't write down how to do it again, and how to explain the financial model or the accounting framework or whatever it is, like, no one's going to understand it after you. So I think really focusing on documentation and system design, and how to make sure that your change initiative really sticks. Like that's something I'm really struggling with and very much focusing on in my role.
Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Sorry. I just want to add another piece of advice, is to have an eclectic career. And it's something that I've seen recently due to the changes that we've all seen. We've all seen many people losing their jobs, and maybe they spent years and years in that specific field or that specific sector, and then it's very hard to land a job somewhere else because the entire market for that field has shrinked. So maybe you specialize on a specific topic, but maybe it's good to have experience in the private sector and the public sector, so that if something happens, it's easy for you to pivot to, somewhere else when things get tough. That's something that I've learned this year. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like everybody to join me in thanking our speakers. And these are examples of who you'll become. Next week, we will have, as I said, Vance Marola talking about corporate sustainability. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for your help tonight.